So I'm teaching a class on basic neuroscience this semester at a community college, and it's all online, but of course I leave this channel behind and primarily focus on neuroscience, at least I try. Because in this channel, I focus mostly on direct experiences. And of course, the idea isn't to get rid of ideas at all. It is to experience that some ideas are useful. And many of the ideas of modern humans are just made up illusions. They don't go anywhere. They don't point to anything that we can experience. But an example of a useful idea, and I didn't watch the video, but it was Bernardo Kastrup, who has a very interesting book, Materialism is Baloney, but he has a video out, and it's The Big Bang as a Useful Illusion. And so in that same kind of framework, ideas can be useful, and neuroscience can be a useful illusion. And certainly when it comes to vision, but the confession I had to make around this video is that it's a story, but it's getting more and more difficult for me to have any faith in it, because it just gets more and more absurd every time I lecture on it. So what is the neuroscience version of vision? Well, there's this idea that the sun and other light sources emit light particles, photons, these quantum particles that, to be honest, we don't really know what they are. If you've ever watched Dr. Quantum, and he describes the double slit experiment, somehow these things are entangled with consciousness. We don't really know what they are, but let's just take it for granted. Sometimes science deals with things that they're not absolutely certain of. And so these photons hit the objects around us. Some of the wavelengths get absorbed, some get reflected. And those particles that get reflected pass through various parts of the front of the eye, clear, transparent parts, and the cornea. And they also have to make their way through vascular systems, through fluid in the eye, a whole mess of things. But some of these light particles make it their way all the way to the back of the eye, the retina, and they interact with the light-sensitive cells, the rods and cones. And these light-sensitive cells process the information. They converge on the optic nerve and exit the eye. They go through the thalamus, and from the thalamus, they go to the visual cortex. And in the visual cortex, all of this information is kept separate. Actually, even through the thalamus, all kinds of information is kept separate. And if you go to the very back of the visual cortex, information from the left eye and the right eye are actually kept separate through the entire pathway. And if you looked at the cortex, and obviously we're talking about fractions of a millimeter, but if you looked at a set of cells, one would process the left eye, then the right eye, left, right, and it's a whole pattern across the visual cortex. But the point I'm making is that all of this contradicts our actual visual experience, which is coherent and integrated. And so the brain keeps it all separate through visual angle. It's all kept separate. And there's no place where it all gets put together again. And so this is one of the main ideas Descartes had. There must be some place in the brain where it all comes together, but neuroscience has shown that there is no place. In fact, I did a video on this a little bit ago where if you're looking at something like, say, a marker, the visual pathway goes up to the parietal lobe in terms of where this is, but the other pathway goes down to the temporal lobe, telling me what it is. And so when you look at it, you get this conscious experience that this is a marker and that's exactly where it's at. But neuroscience tells us that that's an illusion. And so the battle is between direct conscious experience, which suggests that vision is coherent, because I can close one eye, open it, and there's instantly a coherent, one singular conscious pattern of a visual experience, versus the neuroscience, which says these mysterious particles, we don't even know what they really are. They somehow bounce off objects, enter the eye, and then they turn into neural information that passes through various places and somehow gives rise to what we experience as vision. So just consider light. So neuroscience suggests that it's not light out, which is to say these photons are not like little candles flying through space where they illuminate things around them. They are simply information packets. that hit the eye and go through the visual system, and the only light that exists in reality is the light in your visual cortex. And I think that's probably what killed the deal for me. I simply couldn't buy that light is a product of the brain. And so the whole universe is dark. And it's not until a brain takes the information from these mysterious photons, puts it together, and then illuminates the visual cortex. And that's when there's light. The direct conscious experience, if you walk around and experience the world, it seems like there's only one single consciousness. And that is what illuminates the visual experience.